Yes, as crazy as it sounds, we've got 5 different phones from 5 different brands up against each other. Don't worry though, it's not going to look like this the whole time. We've got some side-by-sides and some important comparisons and differences that I found shooting pictures and videos with these 5 different brands' phones. We've got the iPhone 11 Pro with its triple camera system and its deep fusion processor. We have the Samsung Galaxy S20 Ultra with its crazy 108 megapixel image sensor and the periscope zoom camera also. The Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro, which is trying to go head to head with the best from Samsung and Huawei. The Redmi K30 Pro Zoom Edition, one of the most affordable flagship Android phones right now. And the Realme X50 Pro, which is also one of the most affordable flagship Android phones, and will go head to head with the K30 Pro Zoom Edition. I want to show you some side-by-sides of pictures first because it really gives you an idea of just how good all flagship phones are these days when it comes to taking pictures. The differences are tiny. There are just some exposure differences between the phones. This is one of the biggest differences I found. Have a look at just how different the picture looks between the iPhone and the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro. The Mi 10 Pro looks a little dark, whereas the iPhone looks really vibrant in this picture. That can be said for all the Android phones actually versus the iPhone. This is a 1x zoom, moving into a 2x zoom, then into a 5x zoom. Just check out the clarity of those letters. Moving into a 10x zoom on all the phones. This is the extent of the iPhone's zoom, so the Android phones take it over from here into 20x zoom. Looking very closely and at the original files, it's the Mi 10 Pro and the S20 Ultra battling it out at the top there. Look how the red appears much more vibrant in the iPhone's picture compared to the Xiaomi's picture. Xiaomi tend to push up shadows, and this can lead to some overexposure and some washed out colors on some occasions, as you can see here. If Xiaomi were to expose the shadows properly, the red would appear much more vibrant as we get in all of the other phones' pictures. This can be edited after you take the picture though. The Samsung's picture here looks like it was taken on a professional DSLR camera with a huge lens. The natural background blur is incredible, and you just don't get that on the iPhone's image, which does look like it was taken by a smartphone. The iPhone's usually super good at doing this stuff, but on this occasion it was beaten out by the Samsung. You can see that those vibrant colors on the iPhone have maybe gone a little bit too far this time, and the Android phones maybe are dialing it back a bit and look a bit more pleasing to my eye anyway. This picture shows that in certain conditions you will get such similar images between all of these phones. I can see that the clouds have slightly different colors, the roof in the foreground also, but overall you're getting a very similar picture in all of those 5 flagship phones. The differences in this picture are also incredibly small. I do notice a slight color difference in the sign, the Samsung coloring it purple where it's slightly more blue on the Realme phone. In fact, these 2 phones both use a Samsung image sensor under the main camera lens. Even though the price is very different, the image quality and colors are not as different as the price would suggest. This just illustrates how good phones have got at taking still images these days. No matter what the price, you can get a very good looking shot. But how about those high megapixel image sensors? The iPhone doesn't have one, but all the Android phones do. Let's just zoom in on this street sign and see how much detail is kept. But we need to actually zoom in even further to the sign itself. You can judge for yourself the clarity of these. But what stands out for me is that the 12 megapixel image sensor of the iPhone still keeps an incredible amount of detail versus 108 megapixel image sensors and 64 megapixel image sensors. The Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro absolutely nailed this portrait shot. It cut the sign out absolutely perfectly from the background. It looks incredible, and the iPhone just didn't really do it on this occasion. It looks like Xiaomi and Redmi phones have pretty decent software when it comes to portrait modes. It was literally pitch dark under this bridge, so let's switch to night mode and see what changes. The iPhone won't change because it doesn't have a night mode. But just to show you how dark it was under this bridge, I've compared the Mi 10 Pro versus the iPhone, and I think the Mi 10 does a much better job at exposing the very bright background, whereas it's totally blown out on the iPhone's picture. I think the 3 cheaper phones to the left did better jobs at exposing the background. But when it comes to HDR in video, the iPhone definitely steps it up a gear and exposes that background much more properly and much more like the Android phones. Xiaomi phones have a really good HDR for both photo and video. They're doing a really good job here. Both the iPhone and Samsung's pictures stood out for me for looking amazing, really natural, good skin tones and colors. If we just compare the iPhones to the Redmi K30 Pros, the Redmi is overblowing the highlights here, and it's also lightening up my skin tones, which doesn't look too natural. That's definitely something that Redmi and Xiaomi phones do consistently, is brighten and lighten skin tones and overexpose images. For me, it's the iPhone and the Samsung here, but I think the Realme does actually a decent job as well in terms of trying to give a natural look. This also illustrates the difference between exposure. It looks like I have a mask on my face in the Xiaomi device. It's just trying to brighten it up. There are no beauty modes on this at all that I'm filming. It is subtle, but you can just see when you compare them side by side how much brighter the images are on the Xiaomi phones. The back cameras are a different story though. It looks like the lowlights and the shadows in this image being crushed a little bit on the Redmi, whereas Apple's amazing HDR for video is kicking in right now. Other than that though, the 4K video on the Redmi is really crisp, even compared to the iPhones. Notice that in 4K video, the Realme phone doesn't have image stabilization. This may be coming in an update right now, but for right now in 4K, it's a bit wonky compared to the others. A software update will fix that very easily. And I think in terms of colors, it's the most similar to the iPhones. So let's move on to a quick stabilization test, a walking stabilization test for video of these phones. And like I said, in 4K right now, the Realme is not giving me any stabilization, which is unfortunate. The Redmi K30 Pro though is looking pretty stable. It does have OIS, as does the Xiaomi Mi 10 Pro, which is looking very similar. Just look how the colors change when we switch to the iPhone though. It looks like we've gone from black and white into a color TV. And the colors also change dramatically when we switch to the Samsung, which seems to have the white balance set way more towards blue light, and everything has a bluer tinge to the lighting. Once Realme do fix that stabilization issue for 4K, I think they'll have a really decent camera on their hands. But anyway, let's move through to video in all of the phones in Zoom. This is the 3x telephoto. You can get 5x telephoto on the Galaxy S20 Ultra. So you can zoom in more, but it's not a massive difference overall. And the iPhone just has a 2x telephoto zoom, but we've zoomed into 5x just to compare it to the S20 Ultra. Recording in 4K still gives plenty of resolution to zoom in without losing too much detail. But the S20 Ultra does record off that periscope lens. So let me know what you thought of this test, and if comparing 5 phones like this is just too crazy, or you want to see more side-by-sides between many phones so you can see what the differences are. Let me know in the comments. If you liked it, thumbs up, and if you didn't, you're welcome to hit the thumbs down too. Subscribe for all the latest tech news and videos. That's it for now, but I'll see you in the next one.